"Seen anything, partner?" Travis asked, and smiled when Gibbs tensed. Gibbs had posted up on a nearby park bench that overlooked the playground and most of the walking track. That being said, he was also snoring softly by the time Travis got there, and he looked guiltily at his partner as he came awake. The park wasn't terribly busy. Middle school hadn't even gotten out yet, and as Travis took a seat, Gibbs tried to shoo him away. "Hey, budge off. You're gonna blow my cover." Gibbs had traded his uniform for some jeans and a windbreaker, the ball cap he wore pulled down over his thick blonde hair, but no local would have been fooled. Gibbs looked like Gibbs, and everyone in town recognized one of the 7 faces in uniform they might have to depend on in an emergency. At best, someone might think he was an out-of-towner, but only till they got close. "Gibbs, I don't think anybody's going to be fooled by your civvies." Gibbs had opened his mouth to answer, with something biting, no doubt, but about that time, Mrs. Banks jogged past and greeted both of them by name. "Good to see you two are getting some sun," she joked, the older woman brown as a nut. Mrs. Banks was the postmaster for all of Frazier, and she usually ended up running the route herself. This wasn't a tall order in Frazier, and she got a lot of sun by taking the mail on foot. As she jogged past in her purple shorts and stretchy top, Travis hoped he looked that good when he was staring 60 right in the face. "Okay," Gibbs said, putting the hat in his lap. "Just wanted to feel like a real detective for once. Thought undercover work might be fun, but I guess it was dull as most things are around here." Travis nodded, looking out over the tykes playing on the jungle gym with some jealousy. "Well, part of the problem is you're at the wrong playground." Gibbs looked lost. "Huh?" "All the kids we've talked to have flat out said that it's the old one behind the big hedge. Remember?" Gibbs stared into nothing for a minute before slapping his forehead hard enough to make some of the accompanying parents look up. "Damn, you're right. I completely forgot about that. I guess we should stake out the creepy old wooden one then, huh?" Travis got up. "Seems that way. Here, you take the left jogging path, I'll take the right. We'll keep eyes on both sides and hopefully find something worthwhile." Gibbs got up, nodding as he brushed the non-existent dirt off his pants. "Doesn't seem any more likely that we'll find anything out here either. Kids don't go to the old playground if they can help it." "Apparently one does, and that's the one that we're after. Come on. Quick as started, quick as finished," he said, and the two headed off in opposite directions. Travis reflected on what Gibbs had said as he made his way around the walking track. Kids didn't often go to the old playground, and if they did, it was to tell spooky stories or to scare each other in less creative ways. You could almost tell where the new park ended and the old park began. It was like the groundskeepers had made an invisible line where the mowers stopped and the weed eaters never came, and the grass here was yellow and in a state of dishevelment. The picnic tables here were splintery and covered in graffiti and cigarette butts. The high schoolers were not as easily scared off by ghost stories and disrepair. Travis had come out here at dusk more than once to run off necking or drunk teens. No one cared what went on in the old section of Rutherford Park, and it was only a matter of time before someone got the funding to put a soccer field or a baseball field in the spot and ended the old space for good. Travis looked at the hedge as he came up and thought they might have a time getting rid of it. The hedge was a landmark within the park and the last vestiges of the old hedge maze that had once been there. It was close on 9 feet tall and cut another 20 feet off the old park from view. The roots on that thing were likely deep, and it would take more than one cutting to extinguish them when the time came. It seemed to loom over Travis like a giant, and he imagined that it would be daunting for a child as he stood looking up at it. He came around the side of it and found the old playground waiting beyond. The new play area had a metal play structure, a jungle gym, a new swing set, and several of those plastic animals on springs, all set into the bouncy rubber ground that would stop the kiddies from cracking their skulls open if they fell. The old playground had none of the metal constructs the new one held. The old spot was all soft wood and delicate constructs, looking like a castle with climbing walls and hanging bridges. The swings mostly hung on broken chains now, the slide nearly rusted through, and the ground was a quagmire of old wood chips that were as likely to hide a snake as a toy. It made Travis sad to see this much-loved place in such a state. How many times had he and his friends played here on summer days or after school, or with sparklers in hands as they stood in the tower and watched 4th of July fireworks? Too many to count, he thought, and seeing the place like this made him miss his friends that he'd had when he was young. Their faces and names had faded now, all of them leaving after graduation as quickly as they could. Travis had stayed, though, wanting to make a difference in a place he loved, and as he walked towards the structure, he wondered if he had made the right decision. When he saw the flash of orange go by, he thought he might be seeing things for half a heartbeat. When the kid with the pumpkin on his head jumped down from the structure and made his way out of the playground, throwing a backpack over his shoulder, Travis realized what he was really seeing. The kid was in no hurry. He wasn't running, and Travis thought for a second that maybe he hadn't even seen him. The kid was heading towards the woods, heading out of the park, heading towards the farmland, and Travis was worried that his opportunity might pass while he just stood here gawping at him. "Hey," he called, breaking into a run as the kid glanced behind him and broke into a sprint. Travis was about 90 feet from the kid when he'd seen him, but no matter how well his long legs ate up the ground, he never seemed to get any closer. The kid should have been slowed down by the ankle-deep grass he plunged into as he came to the back of the park, but no such luck. He ran in, heedless of the perils within, and Travis paused at the edge of the path as he watched him go. This time of year, it would be easy to step on a cottonmouth or come down on a bunch of ground wasps before the first real freeze of winter could put both of them to ground for a while. The kid disappeared into the back of the grass area, and when Travis heard footsteps grating on the sidewalk, he turned and dropped a hand to his service revolver. Gibbs was out of breath when he came up and never noticed the hand his partner had put on his piece. What happened? I saw you run off, but I didn't. What did..." He dropped onto his butt on the sidewalk and couldn't seem to find his breath as he panted. "It was him," Travis said, also out of breath, but handling it better. "It was the kid with the pumpkin head." You sure?" Gibbs said, as he teetered on the verge of hyperventilation. "How many other kids could it have been with a pumpkin on their head?" Gibbs shrugged. Hopefully not many, or this could be harder than I thought." Travis turned back, and that's when he saw the brat sitting at the edge of the grass and looking at them. The orange stood out against the pines and the birches, and it took everything he had to turn away and head back to the cruiser. It wouldn't do any good to chase this kid through the wood. He'd get him. It was only a matter of time. "This is getting ridiculous, Carl. I'm out 50 pumpkins now, and my neighbor is out about 30. This is becoming a problem, Sheriff. What do you intend to do about it?" Travis had been coming in for his shift the next day when he found Sheriff Carl already meeting with Farmer Stutter in his office. The man had fresh mud on his pant cuffs, and he was doing his best to menace the old sheriff, who looked like a bulldog suffering a terrier. The man was mad about his crops, that much was apparent, but Travis wasn't sure what he wanted him to do about it. Defense of the homestead had always been for the farmers and their hands to handle, not like it had ever really been an issue since the Depression. "Are you finished, Darrell?" Darrell Stutter looked at the old man like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. "What?" "I asked if you were done puffing your chest and were ready to hear what I had to say." Carl took advantage of the shocked silence. "I'll have Gage and Dreyfus make regular patrols by the farm until further notice. In meantime, I'll make it known that anyone we catch helling in the farmlands will be fined heavily for the produce they destroy. Get your hands to move the produce you don't want to risk into your barn, and make sure they stay the night to watch your fence line. At this point, if you end up shooting one of these kids, it isn't like we can really hold it against you." That seemed to get through to the farmer. "Jesus, Carl, Town would probably run me out on a rail if I blasted some kid. Defense of the farms has always been on the farmers, Darrell. Your forefathers didn't want the law telling them how they could and couldn't protect themselves from tramps. But now, suddenly, you want our help. Either accept my help or continue to do it yourself. Either way, get out of my office and stop acting like I owe you something. I have officers working this case, and I'm doing all I can. I really don't appreciate you acting like I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs. Farmer Stutter seemed unsure whether to fish or cut bait, and opted to leave instead. Travis watched him go before leaning against the doorway as Sheriff Carl blew on his coffee. I take it our mystery vandals struck again last night. Carl didn't answer for a few minutes, and when he did, Travis felt a little guilty for ribbing him. He sounded older, more tired than usual. Yes, and not just the Stutter farm either. Ranners and Jarvis left messages with night dispatch, and Gage and Draffer said it was the busiest night they'd had in a long time. $2,000 worth of produce smashed in the field, and no one knows why. Is there a pattern to all this? Travis asked, looking up as Gibbs blundered in with a breakfast sandwich clamped in his teeth. Yeah, but it's not definitive. Travis waited, and when it became clear he wasn't going to leave, Carl continued. They've wrecked other things, but the majority of the carnage is always pumpkins. For some reason, whoever's doing this really doesn't like pumpkins. Travis couldn't help but think of the little pumpkin kid he'd seen yesterday, and he wondered how someone so young could be at the center of all this. They leave any new graffiti behind? Travis asked, on a hunch. Carl made a sour face. More of the same. It's all green man this and pumpkin child that. They leave it in orange and green, but last night's tagging was harder to explain. Why's that? Travis asked, Gibbs coming up behind him as he straightened his uniform shirt. 'Cause it was damn near 15 feet up the side of Farmer Stutter's freshly painted barn. He tossed an envelope to Travis then, the front bearing the shaky handwriting that usually marked the evidence bags you saw him holding. That's a list of people I'd like you two to interview today. Most of them are within town lines, so I didn't figure it would take you long. Travis nodded. We're on it, Sheriff. Parks, he said, wheeling Travis back around as he turned to go. I want this closed soon. This is the sort of thing people remember come election time, and I've become very comfortable behind this desk. Help me stay here, and I'll remember it when it comes time for raises. Understood? Gotcha, boss, Travis promised, turning to go as Gibbs fell in with him. It was time to get back to work. What if the Green Man is more to do with them than we think? Gibbs asked as they left Rowan Oaks Middle School. Like, maybe it's some kind of cult or something. Travis sighed as he dragged another line across his latest hypothesis. That would actually make this a lot easier, Gibbs. If we could chalk this up as a cult or something, some kind of huckster that's directing this pumpkin kid, then it would make things a whole hell of a lot easier to figure out. They had interviewed about 20 kids today, another 10 adults that worked at the 3 schools in Frazier. Travis suspected a few of them, especially the boy who'd come in with green paint still on his hands, but most of them had been dead ends or had good alibis. Travis had been kicking around the idea of some kind of subliminal interaction, maybe even some kind of group delusion, but these kids were likely to be missed if they just up and disappeared in the middle of the night. The high schoolers seemed unlikely to waste their time with something like this, but by the end, Travis found himself more interested in the adults that had come with them than the children. The English teacher, Mrs. Hobbs, had insisted on staying with the middle school students that Travis interviewed, saying they deserved someone in their corner to make them feel comfortable. Travis was all for advocacy, but she seemed to be trying to lead a few of the students in certain directions when it came to the questions. At the elementary school, it had been Mr. French, who had taught 5th grade since Travis was a kid, and at the high school, it had been Mrs. Davies and Mr. Draper, both physical education teachers. He hadn't noticed the pins until Mrs. Hobbs, but he felt like Mr. French had had one too, and the coaches at the high school had definitely been wearing them. The round pin with a blue backing of a snowflake had been unique and had stood out against the jack-o'-lanterns and leaf pins they'd seen some of the others wearing. Some of the kids had been wearing them too, and when Travis asked Mrs. Davies about it, she had laughed and waved it off. They were just a popular fad at the moment, she said, and she had gotten one after seeing the kids wearing them. Walking through a group of girls that came up the steps, Travis definitely saw a few of them in evidence, but their meaning eluded him. "Think about it," Gibbs said, as they made their way to the parking lot to collect the cruiser. "Maybe this green man is like a cult leader or something. Small towns are always supposed to be good places for cults and predatory religious groups. This could be some kind of hostile takeover or encroachment or something." He elaborated as best he could, but Travis wasn't really listening as the cruiser came into sight. The flutter of paper from beneath the wiper blade had caught his eye, and he took it out as he squinted at the message that someone had left him. "Meet me at the parking lot of Crites. I want to help." Gibbs read the message over his shoulder, looking back at Travis questioningly. "Sounds like a trap," he said, looking around for people who were lurking. "Probably," Travis said, "but it's our best lead so far. Feel like catching some lunch at the Crites sandwich counter?" "I reckon," Gibbs said, sliding into the passenger seat as the two headed off to their next case, lunch and this mysterious informant. Sheriff Carl looked up when something hit the front of the station. It was around 1, and Molly was on her lunch break while Carl tried his best to sort out all this nonsense. He already missed the days when the worst he had to think about was arresting some farmer that the DA or the feds wanted for making too much moonshine or growing pot in their back field. Frazier was a quiet place, and the usual Halloween headache was little more than some light vandalism or some houses that needed to be cleaned up. This, however, was beginning to look like something else. This was beginning to resemble anarchy. Something thumped near the front door, but Carl shook it off and got back to work. It's probably the FedEx guy dropping off something anyway. If he needed to sign, he could wait till Molly got back. Carl was doing important work right now. There was a connection here. He could see it, but it was like trying to put a puzzle together without the box. He could see a picture forming, but it didn't mean anything to him. The pumpkins were part of it. The green man was a part of it. The kitties and the Pumpkinhead kid and the messages on the wall, it was all a part of it. The problem was, Carl didn't know what it was. When he heard glass breaking, Carl jumped and threw his pen halfway across the room. It hadn't been the sound of glass shattering, but it had definitely been glass cracking. He got up and headed around the desk, feeling like someone woken up by pebbles against their window, and he stepped out to find a crack running through the glass of the sheriff's office front window, and 3 smashed jack-o'-lanterns on the stoop out front. He would have thought they were pumpkins, but the last one, the one that had made the crack, had left the imprint of a grinning orange splat on the surface. Carl walked out to find the sidewalk empty, but a sudden rustle to his left made him reach for his gun and swivel. It was a note stuck on the stem of one of the jack-o'-lanterns, and Carl reached for it with shaky hands as he lifted it off. "Stop meddling in our affairs and get out while you still can." "I'm getting too damn old for this shit," Carl said, looking out as if expecting to see a little pumpkin watching him from the shadows. Travis started to just leave when he watched the guy in the London fog come walking in. "Hell no," Gibbs said, picking up his tray and starting to leave. "Absolutely not. Sheriff Carl will probably write us up just for being seen at the same lunch counter as this fella." Travis put a hand on his arm, and Gibbs looked at him skeptically as he sat back down. "Are you serious? After the story he wrote about you last 4th of July? Travis could feel his teeth groaning in his mouth as he gritted them. "I don't want to talk to Nathan Casterly any more than you do, but if he has information, then we need it." Nathan Casterly was not well liked around the bullpen, and with good reason. Casterly wrote for Fraziers' only newspaper, The Comet, and most of his stories were a little more sensational than was strictly needed in a town with 5 traffic lights. He wrote the sort of stories that you'd see in a big-time paper, things like City Hall scandals and incompetent leaders' exposés. His favorite subject lately had been the police department, and how they did little more than sit around like lazy hounds until it was time to break someone's skull open. He'd written up Travis last summer for harassment after his car had been towed during the 4th of July parade. He had left out the part about how his little coupe had been parked in a handicap spot, but the article had done little to hurt Travis's career, all told. Travis had his best stony expression prepared for the little paper pusher, but when he turned around to look for them, Travis could tell this wasn't the usual Nathan Casterly of times gone by. Nathan was a mess. His hair was disheveled, the bags under his eyes looked packed for a week-long stay, and he looked around fitfully as he went to sit with them. Travis had taken a booth away from the front window, and Nathan nodded as he took a seat. He glanced around again before settling in and thanking them for coming. "Yeah, well, if we'd known it was you who'd left the note." I know. I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, but this is serious." Gibbs rolled his eyes. "What's wrong, Nat? Some politician steal your girlfriend? Philandering and having bad taste in men ain't a crime." Nathan looked like he wanted to say something, but seemed to swallow it down with a mouthful of coffee. Ha, this is important, and I know you two are working this case. I want to help, while I still can." Travis put a hand up as Gibbs took a breath to sally back with something cutting. "What do you know?" Nathan reached into his pocket and took out a manila envelope. "It's all there. I became aware of people in the woods about 2 weeks ago. Kind of thought it might be a cult. Cults are good for paper sales, especially this time of year. When I saw it was mostly kids going out there, I thought I had something interesting, especially when I saw whose kids it was. The usual troublemakers were there, the Cozy Boys and the Murphys, but Mayor Transdale's son was there too, as well as Selectman Miles's daughter, and my editor's son. Not just kids either, but some of the stars of the local high school, and some adults to boot. They all headed out down the access road right around sunset to meet at this weird pavilion that looks pretty new. There's an altar there, something I can't really describe, but they meet and hold a kind of mass for their green man, whoever he is." Travis had opened the envelope, and sure enough, Nathan had pictures of the meeting. They were grainy, most of them taken from a distance and enhanced a little, but they were there. Travis could see about 20 in all, mostly kids and teens, and a few of them were faces that he knew. The Cozy Boys, both out on bail, some kids Travis had talked to earlier today, and a few adults that he had seen too. Mr. Hobbs, Mrs. Davies, several other teachers from the school, and in the middle of it all was a shabby-looking kid with a pumpkin for a head. "When do they meet?" Travis asked, putting the pictures away before sliding the envelope between he and Gibbs. "Most every evening. I've only been out there about 3 times to see the gathering, but after the last one, I think someone saw me. I've seen people follow me, seen them look at me, or ask me weird things like we're both in on a secret, and I'd better keep it to myself. Someone smashed a pumpkin through my windshield this morning, and the note attached to it said I better get out while I can. Travis nodded. So why go blabbing to the cops then? Nathan made a disgusted noise. Because I'm not going to run just because they say so. This is my town too. I grew up here just like both of you did, and I'm not going to abandon it. I know I'm a persona non grata at the station, but I need protection. I'm afraid that after I talk to you, they'll come after me. So, quid pro quo, fellas. I helped you. Now I need help. Travis looked at Gibbs. What you say, partner? Think we can help him? Gibbs nodded slowly. Oh, I think we can make some arrangements, but they ain't gonna be too comfy. Nathan looked as if he might be regretting this, but he nodded anyway. A half hour later, Nathan Casterly was secured in a holding cell as a person of interest and a witness in an ongoing investigation. Sheriff Carl said they'd keep an eye on him, and as Gibbs and Travis left the station, Travis couldn't help but check the sun. It was about 3 hours before sunset, maybe enough time to get in position before the festivities began. Feel like working a little overtime with me, partner? He asked Gibbs. Gibbs only chuckled. Suppose so. Wasn't like I had anything better to do tonight. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's video. If you still feel like you could do with a little more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that's appearing on your screen? If you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any of the stories we put on here? I make new videos 7 days a week, and I wouldn't want you to miss a one of them. So if you'd like to support the channel, why not go ahead and subscribe? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the great stuff we do here. And of course, if you'd like to support the channel in a more financial way, you could always become a member on YouTube or on Patreon. Spooky Skeletons, that's my $5 members, always get their videos early as opposed to in the evening. And we've got lots of other cool stuff that you can take advantage of. Just go down to Patreon and give it a look, or become a member on YouTube. Speaking of all of our wonderful patrons and YouTube members, let's go ahead and thank them right now. Thanks to Unicorn Hollow, our Spooky Ghost contributor. Thanks to our Spooky Skeleton contributors, Janice, Lee Kendall, and Saikat. Thanks to our Ghostly Reader contributors, Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Tyler Parker, Cinnamon Fox, and Sarah Samar 42. Thanks, guys. We just couldn't do the show without you. Again, if you'd like to support the show in a more monetary fashion, there are links below to Patreon, and you can just go to YouTube and click on membership, if that's something that interests you. There's also links to my latest book below if you'd like to go have a look on Amazon. It should show you the other books I've got as well, so why not go ahead and get the whole collection? And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.